Shavua Tov, everybody. Welcome to the Israel Brief, as always, presented by me, Rolene Marks, because hey, who else is it going to be? And brought to you in partnership with these guys, Lay of the Land. Now, to our weekly newsletter subscribers, and if you do want to subscribe, you can do so via our website. More details about that later. But this week there will be no newsletter because we are taking somewhat of a break before we usher in 2025. Now, before I get into today's broadcast, I do want to warn you that there will be some distressing content that will be discussed. This episode does come with a trigger warning. It is day 451 since the 7th of October. We still want our remaining 100 hostages to be returned to us immediately. 96 of those hostages were taken on the 7th of October, and 4 of those hostages, including the remains of 2 fallen soldiers who fell during Operation Protective Edge in 2014, are being held by Hamas and other terror groups in the Gaza Strip. We want them back now. The weather here in Israel has turned cold. It is raining. We worry tremendously about the situation for our hostages. I'm going to read to you in a minute from the Israeli Ministry of Health report that they have handed into the United Nations. It is very distressing, but at the same time we also think of civilians in Gaza who also are the victims of this war, who face an enormous humanitarian crisis. So let's get on to our first story, and the Israeli Ministry of Health has handed over a report on the situation for hostages. It is absolutely harrowing. Now, as I described last week, the sample portion includes those who were held hostage and were released in the ceasefire deal in November 2023. It is based on the findings of the health workers who worked with them. It is based on their testimony, their eyewitness and personal testimonies, and it is also on the testimony of health workers who have estimated now 451 days in. I mean, 451 days in. It's untenable what these people are enduring. We remember that there are still 2 children being held hostage. Kafir Bibas will turn 2 next month. He will have spent the majority of his life in captivity. We still don't know the whereabouts of the Bibas family. And the oldest is Shlomo Mansour, a survivor of the Farhud, the persecution and execution of the Jews of the Middle Eastern countries. He is 86 years old. This is in addition to another report released last week on genocide, the weaponization of families, the targeting of families for slaughter and torture and kidnapping by Hamas. That is a separate report. It is a devastating read. So some of the harrowing details of the report of the hostages includes the following. Now, I warn you again, this is very, very, very distressing. Hostages, including children, were purposefully branded with a hot object. Child hostages were forced to perform acts of a sexual nature on each other and were tied and beaten daily. One hostage described being sexually assaulted at gunpoint. Others also reported sexual assault. Women were forced to undress in front of captors and tied to beds as captors stared at them. They were whipped, stripped naked. One female hostage was held and bound in dark isolation for a month. Hostages were forced to defecate on themselves. These are specifically the male hostages who were denied access to toilets, to ablution facilities, and as a result were forced to defecate on themselves. Hostages were denied medical treatment for injuries from the 7th of October, including fractures, shrapnel wounds, and burns. Treatment was given without anesthesia. Half of the returned hostages described deliberate starvation with average weight loss of 10 to 17%. Hostages were then deliberately fattened up for the cameras. Now that, of course, brings with it another group of very, very distressing health issues when you starve and then rapidly have to eat. Hostages were psychologically tortured after acute trauma, returning with major emotional issues, including fear of foods that remind them of captivity, fear of drinking a full glass of water in case they can't receive more, and a desire to return to captivity until all other hostages are released. Hostages were released to discover news of dead loved ones, and many returned home without a home to go to. And those are just some of the absolutely devastating conditions that our hostages are being held in. They have received no visits from the Red Cross, no comment from UN Women, no comment from UNICEF, no comment from feminist organizations, no comments from NGOs who call themselves human rights organizations. It is beyond anything we can comprehend. The IDF have reported arresting 240 suspected terrorists with ties to Palestinian Islamic Jihad and Hamas from the Kamal Adwan Hospital in the north of the Gaza Strip. Now, the hospital is believed to be the last major stronghold of Hamas, and they have detained the director of the hospital. Before the IDF raided this hospital, they evacuated patients and brought in medical supplies. Now, this is not the first time that hospitals protected sanctuary status has been violated by Hamas and other terror organizations who routinely have used them as weapon storage facilities, as command centers, and also as places to hide the hostages. We know of at least one hostage whose murdered body was found inside one of the hospitals. The IDF have taken us through this war into places like Shifa Hospital and now Kamal Adwan Hospital in the north of Gaza. Before the IDF raided, some of the terrorists tried to escape dressed up as patients using ambulances. Now, the World Health Organization Director, Dr. Tedros Ghebreyesus, has condemned the IDF raid on the hospital and demanded that the IDF stop conducting these kinds of missions inside hospitals. But I just wonder why Dr. Ghebreyesus hasn't bothered to condemn Hamas for violating the protected status of hospitals and other public areas like schools and religious places and people's homes, using them as launching sites, weapon storage facilities, storage places for hostages, and of course, command centers for terrorists. A Houthi official has warned that until the war in Gaza stops and while children in Gaza are being killed, he says the Zionists will not sleep. Now, funny enough, the last 2 nights we've had relative quiet here. However, we did have a rocket fired towards Jerusalem and parts of the West Bank on Saturday by the Houthis, and as well as routinely towards the area where I live, the center of Israel and Tel Aviv, almost every day last week. The last 2 days have been quiet. Maybe I shouldn't say that because maybe it will prompt more attacks, and these usually happen in the early hours of the morning to wake us up to try and break our resolve. Well, they will not break our resolve, and little do the Houthis know that by targeting Tel Aviv, it's useless. It's a city that never sleeps. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Netanyahu and Defense Minister Israel Katz have threatened not just to teach the Houthis the same lesson as Hamas and Hezbollah, but also to target their leadership. At the end of last week, after our last broadcast, the IAF, using 100 aircraft, struck Houthi targets inside Yemen. This was the biggest attack to date, including the control tower at Sana'a Airport. By sheer coincidence, Dr. Tedros Ghebreyesus happened to be present in the building. And finally, last night, Channel 12 here in Israel published a harrowing report on what was found on the computers that the IDF have seized from Hamas members. It was found that they had hacked into surveillance footage, surveillance cameras rather, including cameras in the communities at the border of Gaza. These are the kibbutzim, and were able to see the movements of its citizens in real time, something that's absolutely terrifying. So from there, they gleaned where to go and attack on the 7th of October. They also hacked into people's personal communication, including emails, photographs, mostly of local council members, and were able to see their communication. They were able to do this since 2020, which goes to show that the planning and preparation for what they call Operation Al-Aqsa Flood or the 7th of October attacks were years in the planning. And also they found detailed plans of the areas and also where to enter and where to target. Now, a couple of months ago, I shared with you my experience seeing the footage, seeing some of the evidence that the IDF had captured, not just on Hamas terrorists on the 7th, but also inside the Gaza Strip. And it included plans for kindergartens, clinics, police stations, the kibbutzim and others. Absolutely terrifying when a kindergarten is the target of your maniacal, terroristic, genocidal murder. So those are top stories. Let's take a look at the audience question of the day, and it comes from Valerie. Valerie says, Raylene, why do Jews break a glass at weddings? Well, I love that because it's such a festive question, and Valerie, we desperately need some festive. Well, the answer is simple. It is to commemorate the destruction of the temple. Now, according to Chabad, which is the teachings that I follow, the breaking of the glass doesn't just remind us to commemorate the destruction of our two temples, but it also reminds us that the temple wasn't just the physical. The temple is in each of us. It is the spiritual. And other beliefs are that when we are born, our twin flame, our soulmate, has decided for us. And the breaking of the glass also symbolizes the fragility of our relationship. So I hope that answers your question. And a reminder, if you have any questions, just pop them in the comment section below or via our website. And speaking of our website, you can find us on www.layoftheland.online, on Facebook at Lottel's site, on YouTube at the Israel Brief right here. Like, share, subscribe. You guys know what to do. We are on LinkedIn at Raylene Marks, on Instagram at Raylene_Marks, and on X at Lay of the Land 5. Guys, God bless you all. Chag Chanukah Sameach. And I will see you tomorrow for the last Israel Brief of 2024. Take care of yourselves and each other.